So I'm very glad to be here, and I'm so happy to see you, live streamers and people in person. The topic is Born to Create. And a few things about this. One is when we talk about creativity, as the reading has prepared us for as well, beautiful reading and choice. The creativity that we're talking about is not just artistic expression. It's about having the right alignment in terms of our connection with the divine, in the connection with spirit. And there's a myth that Plato talked about. He said that in terms of the soul's journey, that the soul at first knows all things and is in that realm of absolute divine knowledge. And Plato called them the forms, these perfect ideas that once you know them, you are changed and transformed. He said, though, that when the soul is coming into the body, it is dipped into the river of forgetfulness and drinks from that river. And so arriving on earth, there's no remembrance of all that one knows. And so life becomes a journey of remembrance, a journey of awakening to the truth that one already knows. And so I can't help but be aware of the world today as it is. And I keep trying to have a perspective that makes it more understandable or palatable. Some of it is so difficult. And so I had this idea that came to me about how to look at it. And what if the whole world is having a dark night of the soul? This gives me hope, because what we know about the dark night of the soul is that it is a part of a process that's occurring. That when the dark night of the soul occurs, the old structures that we've been leaning upon and have been relying upon crumble. And I see these images on TV of all this crumbling. And so the things that we've been familiar to lean upon are changing. But what the overall structure is allowing us to do is to have a deeper reliance on the spiritual foundation that is part of our legacy. We are born to create, but we have to know what that alignment is. So I find that it gives me hope, because it's not just what it looks like. There's something more that's trying to be born. There's something more that's trying to emerge from this. And people who have had the dark night of the soul will say that even though it is very difficult, it was the most meaningful experience of their lives, because it had them come into greater connection with the divine. So I was thinking about this. It's a time of how do we get in touch with that alignment that we have as ourselves with God, as ourselves with others, and with ourselves with the global situation. So what I have here in mind is to talk about these three aspects, but to do it as if we were utilizing a tool that's very helpful, which is the visioning process. So the visioning process allows us, it's a meditative communication that allows us to see who we are in our identity with our spiritual selves. So the first question, and if we have time, I hope that we can experience this all together. The first question is, what is God's vision of my life with all of my talents and resources? And what we start with the visioning process is first that there is a recognition that God is this radiance of love, of peace, of wisdom, of all of the attributes of the divine, and that we are in alignment with that. So we start the visioning process, and we start with exploring this opportunity in the world today by immersing ourselves in love, by immersing ourselves in the reality of love, and then putting aside all preconceived ideas of what the answer to this question is going to look like. Can you do that with me? So we immerse ourselves with love, the power that Ernest Holmes says, all life is bound together by one common law of love, and love is the self-givingness of spirit, the universal urge to express, manifested in and through all that is visible and invisible. Emerson put it this way: we lie in the lap of an immense intelligence. This is our inheritance. We have access to this, and we have it through the faculty of intuition. Intuition is called by some the express train to the truth. We know it directly. It is that flash of insight that comes across the mind at some point and illuminates the situation. Is a gift. But Emerson says that the difference between the ordinary person and the genius is that the ordinary person gets the flash and says, oh, that's probably nothing. Who am I to have a thought like that? But the genius recognizes that idea and goes with it and recognizes it for what it is. So we start with immersing ourselves with love, in love, putting aside our own preconceived ideas and opening ourselves to the answer. So when we do that, we remember also one of the great examples of creation was in Genesis, when it starts with, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. This world needs more light. The light that we can bring to it. So what is God's idea of our life? What are our talents, our resources that we are open and available to express? So shall we do that just for a moment, just so you can catch a little bit of that vision? So you can turn within if you'd like, or have an open-eyed gaze. What is God's vision of your participation with your spiritual practice so that you can have that connection with God? What does it look like, feel like, sense like? And be willing to accept whatever form this comes in. A word, a sound, just an inner knowing. And know that we can come back to this whenever we choose. The ancients say that when there is radiance in the soul, and there's an awareness of that, then it overflows into the family. When there's radiance in the family, it overspills into the community. And when there is radiance in the community, it overspills into the universe, and the world is in harmony. So, if this were a workshop, I'd have you share your ideas, but we'll do it a different way today. So, what is God's vision of our life in relationship to each other? I love the Celtic idea of the Anam Cara, the soul friend, the one that when you are in the presence of that love and acceptance, when you can just be yourself, you are home. I'm fortunate to have those kinds of friends. Martin Buber talks about it as the I-thou, to be able to see the other as the divine. The Hindu tradition talks about it as namaste. The divine in me sees the divine in you, recognizes the divine in you. And what a difference the world would be if we approached our relationships with each other in that way. And I believe, and this is what gives me hope today, that as we practice the prayer and meditation that are giving us access to an awareness of God, and as we look at each other through these qualities of divine knowing of the other person's identity, it changes things. Prayer changes things. We have a different frequency that is being added to the bombardment of images and ideas that we get through the media. I'm not looking away from that, but there are other stations like WGOD. There are other frequencies, and they are alive and they exist. As the song mentioned about Imagine, 50 years later, my students are still inspired by that song. And when asked what would be a creative expression of what your hope for the world is, they bring up that song. It's such a wonderful thing. So when we treat each other in that same love and respect, that gives us an alternative to people being exploited, people being disrespected, people not being included. It changes things. What we think, how we interact with each other, makes a difference on a vibratory level. And I think that that's part of our work. So, the last part of taking a look at God's vision and seeing ourselves in relationship to God, in relationship to others, and what about relationship with the world? This is the time of the semester where I give students a project. They have to combine global citizenship, human rights, and the philosophy of religion. And it takes us to face with the realities that we live in today. And I must say to you that I am inspired and feel hope that the world in the young people's hands are going in the right direction. I have faith that they're taking the world in a new direction, in a new way. But a global citizen, you may be asking yourself, what is that? A global citizen is knowledgeable about people, customs, cultures outside of their own domain. So there's an awareness that other people are on the planet and they have different customs and ideas. And secondly, there is an understanding that we are interdependent, we are interrelated, and that brings with it peril and possibility. How we are going to interact with each other has an effect. I mean, it's such a teaching about oneness. You cannot pollute the air on one side of the planet and not have it affect another. So having a sense of global awareness is what it means to be a global citizen. And then the third point is, and here's the one that I hope we'll do together, is committed to combining one's learning and awareness about the world and global citizenship and bringing it together as a dedication to foster a livable, sustainable world. When we talk about in religious science, we are envisioning a world that works for everyone. In a way, we're talking about being global citizens and having an awareness of that. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it was formed in response to World War II so that people would never experience some of the atrocities that went on there. And as a result of that document, there have been tremendous changes. So the people got together in the United Nations and had a committee that was led by Eleanor Roosevelt. And 148 states came together and for 3 years came up with what are those human rights that everybody should be guaranteed, regardless of where they lived, how much money they have, or what their nationality, race, gender is. They came up with 30 different ones. And you can recognize some of those ideas in the attributes of God. The right to life, the right to liberty, the right to freedom, the right to have a home. And there were this document that's not very long, took 3 years in the making to have people agree throughout the world. And it was translated into 500 languages and is the most translatable document in the world. And when I think about that, it gives me hope that we can focus on what people deserve, people have a right to, and through our love of the world and for other people, changes it. So let's put it all together for a moment. We ask ourselves, what is God's vision of my life? I am here for a purpose. We are here for a purpose. How does that express in my relationship with others? So many students that I've been involved with and other people in other forms of life have been really affected by the pandemic because of the social isolation. It's important to have relationships that have people thrive and be part of a community. And many, many people are having some imbalance because of that. But I think that knowing some different ideas about what those relationships look like can help that. And it's so obvious to me that the world needs our attention, our energy, our prayer, our meditation. Let's make that WGOD station more available to people. When I heard this song, I wanted to just, I think we have a minute to do this. So let's just have an experience of asking God some of these questions. And even if we don't finish it, you'll know how to begin it. What is God's vision of my life? What is God's vision of my relationships? What is God's vision of my role as a global citizen? How can I be of service? And we give thanks for this and ask one more question. How must I grow to be a vehicle for this vision? What do I need to cultivate in myself? What do I need to release and perhaps let go? Thank you for being available for that. And I leave with one last thought. When I was playing this song for my students about their projects, having them imagine, I'm asking us to intuit. There was a video that John Lennon made with Yoko Ono. And while the music and the words of the song are playing of Imagine, they're walking into a room with ceiling to floor windows that are covered by thick drapes. And they just silently walk into the room and push away the drapes so that the light floods into the room. Let there be light. One more second. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Thank you so much.